What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So the other night, Sony actually showed up to CES with some PlayStation stuff to talk about, that being their new PlayStation VR headset, the PSVR 2. They showed up with specifications as well as a look at a game developed specifically for the platform. We'll go over all that here today. Also, we're going to be talking about some new technology that's going to be put into use with a handheld coming up that potentially could fix the Joy-Con drift issue that Nintendo is facing as they head into the future. And we're also going to be talking about another big Game Pass announcement because what else is new? Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below and ring that notification bell so you can keep up to date with all of the uploads here on the channel. And we're going to start today with Ghosts of Tsushima, one of my favorite games from the PlayStation 4 generation, next to, of course, God of War, which I still think is the best game from that generation, especially from like a first-party perspective with Sony. However, it does appear that Ghost of Tsushima has done very well in the sales department. We can see this tweet posted up by Sucker Punch saying, "We're thrilled and amazed that Ghost of Tsushima has officially sold more than 8 million copies. Thank you so much to everyone who has played since launch. We are so incredibly appreciative and grateful for the support." Now, the game itself has received ongoing updates. They had the full multiplayer. They did the director's cut, which was kind of just another launch, obviously with the PS5 in mind there. But for a brand new IP, 8 million copies sold is very good. I saw people comparing it to like games that have several iterations in, right? Different sequels and all of this. No, Ghost of Tsushima with 8 million copies sold, M-rated game, brand new IP, was great. 8 million copies. I hope that means we could see a sequel because it would probably sell even more than that, but I just really like Ghost of Tsushima, so I would love to see Sucker Punch turn this into an entire series, but who knows, Sony may have something else in mind for them. Either way though, great to see Ghost of Tsushima do so well. Also, it does look like there's a bit of a shakeup going on at Playground Games right now with Microsoft, and we can see this posted up by Windows Central, where they say Playground Games co-founder Trevor Williams is set to replace Gavin Rayburn as studio head. Now, Gavin Rayburn has been in games for decades now. I mean, they formed, him and Trevor Williams formed Playground Games back in 2009. Of course, we know Microsoft did acquire the studio, and a lot of it had to do with what they were able to accomplish with all these different Forza Horizon games, which Forza Horizon comes out and we just assume it's going to be like a 90-something on Metacritic. But clearly, he made a lot of money with that. It was like millions of dollars. And you get further into game development years and years, decades later, like I said, and you probably look around and say, you know what, I've done a lot. And now it's probably time to ride off into the sunset and retire comfortably. That's what I think looks like is happening. I don't think you're seeing pop up at like Sony or something like that. No, I think he's basically just moving on into retirement. And I mean, the other person there who co-founded it with him will be taking the reins as they work on things like Fable, which will be very interesting to see how that one turns out. But hey, looks like a pretty standard retirement that's basically been announced here, and we'll see what happens next for Playground. Oh, and for everyone who's still looking for a PlayStation 5, which based on the comments whenever we talk about PlayStation 5 sales is a lot of you, it does appear we could be seeing a pretty substantial restock in the next day or two at Target. We could see this posted up by Jake Randall over on Twitter. If you're looking for PlayStation 5, Xbox, Switch, video cards, basically any electronic or item that's hard to get, he generally keeps things updated when we see stock like this, for example. Target PS5 inventory, some stores, as you can see, already have 150 or even 200 disc consoles ready. We're looking to see if those will go live either today or tomorrow. It appears to be one of those 2 days. Yesterday, PS5 systems went live on Best Buy. They were going pretty quick, but not immediately. Like some people were able to jump in line and actually get a PlayStation 5. So I'm hoping this means some of you will finally be able to get one, as I do see a lot of you who say you're just unable to find one. This is a good person to follow and keep up to date, specifically on this Target restock, because it may be to the point where you actually have to go to the store and pick it up. It won't just be all online. It has to be shipped out. Situation where bots pretty much rule those transactions overall. They go into stock and then they're just gone immediately. So here's hoping some of you can actually beat the bots this time and pick it up even in store. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with PlayStation at CES. I was pleasantly surprised that they decided to reveal quite a bit of information at the Consumer Electronics Show. They don't typically do it. Remember one year they showed the logo and that like trended online and it was like, wow, the PlayStation 5 logo. Who would have thought it would have been PS5, right? But This time they showed up with quite a bit of information around something you would say is more enthusiast grade when it comes to electronics, that being virtual reality. And we can see this posted up on PlayStation blog. I'll link this down below in the sources because there's quite a bit of information. They seriously released an entire spec sheet. But we can see this posted up saying PlayStation VR 2 and PlayStation VR 2 Sense controllers. So we do have a name now for those controllers that we saw last year, the next generation of VR gaming on PS5. They also showed off our first look at a game made specifically for PSVR 2, that being Horizon Call of the Mountain. That's from Guerrilla and Firesprite. Remember, Firesprite seems to mostly focus on VR games. Sony bought them or acquired them, and we figured that was to work on VR games going forward, and here they are, co-developing a Horizon game with Guerrilla. We'll come back to that here in a minute. But first, let's talk about some of the features that they outlined here, starting with visual fidelity. They go on to say that it'll have 4K HDR, 110-degree field of view, and foveated rendering, which is a big deal actually for this headset, especially for the longevity of it. We could, I'm sure, see some sort of iteration of the PS5 years into the future, PS5 Pro, something like that. But the headset, unfortunately, for like the PS4, has not cut it since it released after several years. It just feels ancient. Foveated rendering being built into this is pretty cool because that will help with frame rate, especially as we get more and more demanding games in virtual reality. The idea there is it will render specific parts of the scene that your eyes are focused on, because if it's in your peripheral vision, you don't necessarily need to have that as clear as possible. You can kind of skimp on pixels essentially and more or less focus on the parts that you are really looking at. They also mention an OLED display, and you will have a resolution of 2000 by 2040 per eye and smooth frame rates of 90 to 120 hertz. It will have headset-based controller tracking, which they say with inside-out tracking. PSVR 2 tracks you and your controller through integrated cameras embedded in the VR headset. What this means is you will not need a camera like sitting in front of you that you then have to sync up the headset to, which is something we ran into with the PlayStation VR headset back when it released on the PlayStation 4. So a welcome addition there. Good to see. New sensory features, of course. They did talk about those controllers last year, but they do talk about headset feedback, 3D audio, and it sounds like, along with the eye tracking, which would be required basically for foveated rendering, you'll have vibration built into the headset. I'm curious how that'll go over. I mean, it's kind of cool because we had heard some talks about this, but the idea of, I guess, having haptic feedback on your forehead or around the sides of your head, maybe when it's raining, as an example, that could work to immerse you further into the game itself. So something to kind of keep an eye on there. And then the other big thing they seem to focus on is how you would connect this headset to your PlayStation 5. It was a whole thing. Like, seriously, it was a massive production to get the PS4 PlayStation VR headset hooked up. You had like a booster box, and it didn't have HDR pass-through at first, and they released a new revision of the headset that did have HDR pass-through. This headset, this PSVR 2, will connect with a single USB-C cable. It is not wireless. There are a lot of people who are hoping it would be. I just don't think we're there necessarily with the technology for it to be a good enough experience for what Sony is shooting for here, which obviously they're shooting for high fidelity visuals, frame rates, all of that there. I think if they want to get to that point where they don't have like cables or anything coming off of it, they may as well just go all in one like we see with the Quest 2 currently. But having a single cable, USB-C, that just plugs into the system is a massive step up from what we had with the original headset. As for the game that they showed off, that's Horizon Call of the Mountain, again from Guerrilla and Firesprite, who will be co-developing this. Looking at what they showed off, it was a very brief glimpse. Visually looked very impressive because I know people think of VR games and it's like, doesn't look very good in terms of graphical quality because they have to split it up into two different images and you might get a screen door effect, all these different things, right? But it looked good visually. So from what they're saying, this is going to be a game that basically moves more into the lore around Horizon. I believe they're talking about you not necessarily being Aloy or any known character. You'd be an original character that would kind of observe and see things as it's going on. I don't know if this is going to be an on-rails experience. We didn't see quite enough, but I did see some speculating that could be the case online. So we'll see a bit more about this one. I'd like to think that they're going to have like a sandbox area and just kind of walk around, and you do have an entire entire game that plays out and not one that feels super confined. I like the idea of using Horizon since we have Forbidden West coming out. There's a lot of hype around it, and it's a known Sony IP. Kind of introduce VR too. Sure, we could have an Astrobot or something that they come out with. I would still like to see that be its separate game away from VR, maybe with a VR mode. But I think the other game they are going to talk about and probably show off is the new Gran Turismo 7. That one to me makes the most sense because we know that Polyphony has experience working with the VR headset on the PS4. Why not let them go all out with the PSVR 2, that sense controllers, haptic feedback, all that different stuff. But I think what they're showing here is impressive. My question comes now down to price, because what I'm reading here with the specifications, all of this sounds like a $500 to $600 headset minimum. It could be higher than that. It would be weird when they introduce it and it's like the same or more than the system itself, but based on everything they're jamming into this headset, it will be, I think, a moment of sticker shock. But if they can get that on you and you could try it out maybe at a Best Buy or something, I think the experience will at least leave a lasting impact on people to where they consider it more so than when they first see that price. We'll find out more, I'm sure, as we head through this year, because I still think they're going to try to launch it into like the holiday season, and I'm excited to see more about it. They didn't show us what the headset looks like, which is going to be interesting because it reminds me of what happened with the PlayStation 5. They talked about it, right, quite a bit up until they finally showed it, and that was a whole thing on its own. So is this going to be a very weird looking headset? Well, that remains to be seen. Next up, let's talk about a big Xbox Game Pass announcement that was made yesterday, and I feel like we just keep getting these. We just had Mass Effect Legendary Edition get announced for the subscription, along with several other titles, but now it looks like Ubisoft is putting their next big release on there as well, and we can see this posted up over on Ubisoft.com saying Ubisoft Plus coming to Xbox and Rainbow Six Extraction launching on Xbox Game Pass. Now, this is coming out January 20th. It's going to apparently just drop right into Game Pass, and Ubisoft Plus is Ubisoft's subscription service. Very similar to Game Pass, but obviously it's all Ubisoft games, and they have developed quite the library of titles that they are able to at least fill it out with over 100 titles. I do wonder if we will get to a point where this will just kind of merge in with Xbox Game Pass, similar to what happened with EA Play. I'm sure talks are ongoing because they don't really say anything about when the service will show up on Xbox. I want to be clear, it is not announced here at this time that they will be together and merged. They are just saying, hey, Ubisoft Plus is coming to the Xbox console as a separate subscription service. But seeing Rainbow Six Extraction be added in on Xbox Game Pass and Xbox Game Pass PC, both versions of Xbox Game Pass, is interesting. It makes me think that Ubisoft maybe is trying it out. They're like, I wonder how many people we could get into this game, because remember, Ubisoft is all about player engagement and post-spend. So after you buy the game, can we get you to buy more stuff in the game? And if they kind of lower that barrier of entry, because Ubisoft's getting a check for Extraction. They're not just doing it out of the kindness of their heart. Microsoft opened up the checkbook, wrote them, I'm sure, a check worth several millions of dollars in order to get Rainbow Six Extraction into the service. But that works for me because I wasn't initially super excited about Rainbow Six Extraction. I'm still not, but when it goes into Game Pass, I just go through, download it, and I can try it out. Who knows? Maybe the game turns out to be really good, but at least I won't have that barrier of entry of $30, $40, $50, $60 times 70 for some of these newer games. I just kind of go in there, try it out, and if it's good, cool, I'll keep playing it. If not, we'll do what we do on Game Pass, and let's kind of move on to the next one. Next up, let's talk about a new handheld that's making some pretty big claims around stick drift, which the biggest one, obviously, that people talk about is the Joy-Con, which seems to experience it more than others, although I do believe there are just a lot of Joy-Cons out there, and it does seem anyway that they fail more so than the Switch Pro controller or the Xbox controller or the PlayStation controller, and it seems to be that mechanism that's just used in the Joy-Cons now. Well, it does appear that this handheld right here that you can see, that's the Ayaneo Next, is going to be using Hall effect sensor for the joysticks and the triggers. Now, it's described as basically a series of magnets in order to track where the stick is moving to, and the components don't make contact with each other, which is quite different than how current joysticks work, where you get kind of this rubbing inside for the different materials, and that's how we get different like dust particles or other things that build up and will give false readings, like Link just running off of a cliff, or you'll have cursors and stuff just moving all over the place wildly, which people have shown even out of the box, which is a little strange there. Now, this is a handheld that isn't going to see the kind of manufacturing volume that the Switch, for example, sees. So it's certainly going to be something to keep an eye on here, because if this does well, I could certainly see Nintendo looking into this more and more, and who knows, maybe they already have been, because this is something that's been in development for a little while. I actually saw press releases about this back, I think, beginning of last year or midway through last year, like May or June, and it was from Tech and their electromagnetic stick. So I have to imagine Nintendo is very aware of this. To think that they are not looking at the Joy-Con now and wondering, how can we fix this going into next gen? Because I've already told you guys many times, they're not going to be able to fix this more than like maybe changing some of the components out inside the Joy-Con. They're basically locked in for now, but I don't expect them to take the current Joy-Con into the next gen for like their next Switch or anything like that. I could see them trying out something like this, and it's good to see that we do have some technological advancements when it comes to these different joysticks, because drift is across the board for now, right? We see it with, I mean, we've seen it since really the 360, even the N64 when it got really lazy on you, but it just seems to be popping up more and more now, and I hope Nintendo is able to fix it as we go into the next gen. So we'll keep an eye on the Ayaneo, especially when reviews start to come out, how those joysticks feel, the tracking, and then just over time if they start to drift, because, hey, that could be the direction that Nintendo goes in over the next few years. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Xbox Dev Mode. Now, this is something you can sign up for with Microsoft, and it gives you kind of this sandboxed part of the OS, and it allows you to develop games, applications, and what a lot of people have done, run unsigned code so you can do emulation of GameCube games, for example, which I did here on the channel, and it was kind of cool to be able to do that on your Xbox. Kind of a surreal experience there. But it does look like something has happened where Microsoft just randomly went around and started banning, or at least deactivating, quite a few Xbox Dev Mode accounts. In fact, on GBA Temp, people were just kind of comparing notes showing an email that said if you had not uploaded or submitted some sort of game or application to the Windows Store over a course of about 90 days, they were just considering you inactive and deactivating the account, which is odd because you actually spend about $20 in order to get access to that part of the OS. Well, it does appear this may have been an accident outright, and it was a little odd because it happened right at the beginning of 2022, almost like it was scheduled or some sort of cleanup or something that they were doing there. Well, we can see this posted up over on Twitter from Jason Ronald, saying, "We have no plans to remove or disable developer mode on Xbox consoles. We continue to believe in and support a healthy independent app and game development community on Xbox. As part of a regularly scheduled maintenance to clean up inactive accounts, a number of partner center accounts used to enable developer mode on Xbox One and Xbox Series X and S consoles were inadvertently deactivated. We are actively working on identifying and re-enabling these accounts as soon as possible. Once an account has been reactivated, users will be able to re-enable developer mode on Xbox One and Xbox Series X and S consoles. If your account was accidentally deactivated and you would like to restore access sooner, feel free to contact report@Microsoft.com. We apologize for the inconvenience, and we are working to remedy this as quickly as possible, and thanks for your patience." So obviously a good response here from Microsoft after just a lot of confusion online. And I know a lot of people are using developer mode to do things like emulation with RetroArch, which people have said you can use a browser and actually use those applications just in regular retail mode. I haven't tried it myself. Maybe I will. Could make for a fun video there. But the whole purpose of this developer mode is so that they can provide basically anyone who has an Xbox Series, an Xbox One, anything like that, with a dev kit, right? It's easy. You just go in there, you sign up, you pay the $20, and then you have an entire area of the OS that you can develop in freely, which has been a really cool thing for Microsoft. So good to see that this was already resolved. Make sure you contact that email if you want to get yours re-enabled sooner, but it does appear they're going to be going around and just re-enabling them over time. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're taking a little poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, do you think Nintendo will have a direct of some kind in January? 28% said yes, 72% said no. I left that open, by the way, a direct of some kind, because technically you could have like a Pokemon Direct or a Pokemon Presents, and they might talk about Legends Arceus. They could potentially do a full Direct in January, although recently, over the last few years, it's been like a Direct mini in January, but if they do the full general Direct, it ends up being in February, and that's kind of where I'm thinking it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be a week or two after Legends Arceus comes out. I don't think Nintendo wants to blow up the news with all these other cool games coming up, and then Arceus kind of gets left out a bit and it kind of gets overrun. So that's where I'm thinking right now. The first half of February is where I'm looking for Nintendo's big blowout and talks about things coming up for 2022. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Lucas saying the coaching option is Sony's form of the Nintendo hotline 2022 and bringing back hotlines. Yeah, back then, if you didn't know how to beat a game, or you were stuck at a certain point and you didn't necessarily have like a dial-up connection or anything to look up online if anyone had posted something about it, you would call the Nintendo hotline or the tips and tricks hotline, and it was posted on every Nintendo Power magazine from what I remember, and they probably knew what they were doing there because kids would call the 1-900 number. It was like $1 and change per minute. So if you were on the line for like 20 minutes going over how to beat a certain part of The Legend of Zelda or something, you would get a bill in the mail for like $25 or $30, and that's just maybe for one call. So imagine if you were a kid just going through calling the hotline for every little thing, and then your parents got a bill in the mail for a couple of $100s. I can tell you that happened to one of my friends in school back then, and they were not happy. And ladies and gentlemen, that's good to hear for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's Nintendo and their Joy-Con drift going into next generation? Do you think they'll look into something like these Hall effect sensors, or do you think they have their own plan in mind? Let me know about that. And then also, what about the PlayStation VR 2 headset? Looking over the specifications now with a potential $500 to $600 price, are you interested and will you pick one up? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.